In Pokemon, there are multiple different stats you need to keep in mind during battle. And during the first generation, there's arguably one stat more important than the rest. The special stat determined how strong your Pokemon was when using a special move, along with their defense against opposing special moves. This was later changed to be two different stats in special attack and defense respectively. But in the first generation, all of this was determined by one stat, which made it incredibly vital to most Pokemon's success. Starting us off at number 10, we have Omastar. This is a water and rock type Pokemon with a mediocre 55 speed, 70 HP, and 60 attack, but a massive 115 special and an even stronger 125 defense. Omastar is a fairly strong Pokemon, which is mainly brought down by its lackluster typing. Water and rock leave Omastar with 3 weaknesses in ground, fighting, and electric, along with a brutal 4 times weakness to grass. This, along with Omastar's poor HP of 70, means that even with its insane bulk, it can be cleanly one-hit KO by almost any grass-type attack from the likes of Venusaur and Victory Bell. Omastar may reside down at the underused tiered Smogon, but it has a specific niche due to being a water type who isn't neutral to the powerful normal types such as Kangaskhan and Persian, which gives it a slight edge over the common Vaporeon. Omastar also deals with the move Wrap incredibly well as it resists the move, and can easily force out your opposing Dragonite with an Ice Beam. Omastar unfortunately has no place in any playthrough, as it's a fossil Pokemon, which means you obtain it at the end of the game. Omastar does have an extremely niche use as it counters the legendary birds Articuno and Moltres extremely well. And even if they aren't exactly as common as before due to the rise in water types like the previously mentioned Vaporeon and Tentacruel, it was enough to give Omastar its first claim to fame in the UU tier back in the day. Omastar really suffers from its typing and speed, as it's incredibly easy to revenge kill an Omastar with a Pokemon like Vaporeon, Electabuzz, or even the very Dugtrio Omastar was supposed to dispatch due to its ground type weakness. Omastar is a fine Pokemon and even has multiple great qualities, but its lack of coverage beyond Ice Beam and Surf leave it underwhelmed by a large number of common Pokemon. And at number 9, we have Hypno. This is a pure psychic type with 70 defense, 73 attack, and a rough 67 speed, but a decent 85 HP, and similar to Omastar, 115 special. Hypno is tied with Omastar at 115 special, but what pushes Hypno slightly over Omastar boils down to 2 factors. The first is Hypno's pure psychic typing. Water and rock aren't terrible types on their own, but the psychic type is arguably the single best type in the entire game, as it only has one weakness to the awful bug type. The other reason Hypno edges out Omastar is due to its move pool and accessibility, as Hypno fittingly contains the powerful Hypnosis, which is a 60% accurate status move to put your opposing Pokemon to sleep. Sleep in Generation 1 is incredible, as it not only stops your opponent from doing anything for up to 6 turns, it also requires them to spend one entire turn waking up, so if you can put a Pokemon to sleep, it's effectively game over. As mentioned, Hypno is also incredibly easy to obtain, as you can get one right after the second gym in Route 11, meaning you can have a powerful psychic type effectively from the beginning of the game. Hypno does have a few flaws keeping it from seeing genuine play competitively, which are mainly due to its lack of coverage and secondary typing. Hypno may have higher special attack than a Pokemon like Exeggutor and Jinx, but their secondary typings give them far more valuable niches than a Pokemon who really only has psychic attacks to use. Hypno does have a niche in the overused tier, as it's the only Pokemon with the combination of Hypnosis and Thunder Wave to paralyze its targets, which is an incredibly useful way of slowing down threats who outspeed and threaten Hypno, without needing to risk missing Hypnosis. Hypno is a decent Pokemon who at least has a niche in the overused tier, which allows it to barely scrape by into the number 9 slot. And at number 8, we have Magneton. Magneton is an electric and, well, just electric type, as the steel type does not exist in Generation 1. Magneton is quite an anomaly in Generation 1, as it has absolutely awful stats at 50 HP, 60 attack, 70 speed, and its only redeeming qualities are its solid 95 defense and its astronomical 120 special. Magneton is one of the most hit or miss in the game, as even though it has incredible special stat, it effectively only has a single attack to utilize it with, that being Thunderbolt. Magneton is the definition of a one-trick pony, but it does that one trick so well it ends up as a genuine threat when utilized well. Even bulky Pokemon such as Vaporeon and Kangaskhan drop to 2 Thunderbolts. Using Magneton requires you to have counters for ground and grass types at all times, as it's basically useless against them. Its only real coverage is Hyper Beam, which barely does 25% damage to a Venusaur due to its terrible attack stat, so it can't deal any real damage to them. Magneton is fairly awful in a playthrough, as to obtain one, you need to go all the way to Fuchsia City to obtain, surf, then go all the way to the power plant and find one. And if you're unaware, there's also a certain big bird at the power plant that's so much better than Magneton, it's not even a competition. Legendary Pokemon aside, even Pokemon like Electabuzz and Jolteon are better electric types than Magneton, as they boast a great speed that can actually threaten Pokemon such as Dodrio and Tentacruel, without giving them time to attack first. Magneton isn't a terrible Pokemon, as it just lacks any defining trait beyond its high special stat. However, that just is not enough to make a Pokemon viable, especially when there are multiple other electric types who have a more pronounced niche, or just better stats overall. And at number 7, we have Tentacruel. Tentacruel is a water and poison type with actually incredible stats, as even though its attack is only 70, it has an 65 for defense, it has a wonderful 100 speed, 80 HP, and 120 special. Tentacruel is a major threat both in playthroughs and competitively, as even though it has a devastating weakness to the psychic type, it has enough great attributes to make up for it. Tentacruel has access to the devastating Wrap, which in combination with its wonderful speed means that Tentacruel can trap many powerful Pokemon. In Generation 1, Wrap traps your opponent for 2 to 5 turns, leaving them helpless to do anything besides take constant damage or switch out. This, along with Tentacruel's excellent special, means that almost nothing really loves having to switch in on a Tentacruel, as even the normal immune Haunter isn't a massive fan of switching in to blink a Wrap, as it always is a risk of dying to a Surf immediately. Tentacruel is also solid through playthroughs, as you can obtain one as soon as you get the Super Rod after the Electric Gym. Tentacruel does have a lot of competition from other water types, such as Starmie and Slowbro, but as they're in the overused tier, Tentacruel is free to rule the underused tier below. Tentacruel is so good in the UU tier that it's known as one of, if not the absolute best Pokemon in the tier. However, there is one massive flaw with Tentacruel that really holds back its potential. Tentacruel is a poison type, which is so bad in Generation 1 that it's usually a death sentence for 99% of poison types. The poison type isn't only terrible due to its weakness to Psychic, but also because it's weak to the common ground types such as Dugtrio, meaning Tentacruel is a water type who can't even reliably check a ground type. Tentacruel is still strong with the poison typing, but even down in UU, that is the most common way teams exploit Tentacruel to win the game. Tentacruel is a great Pokemon, and even with an unfortunate typing, it's still one of the most versatile, and can tear through entire teams if you aren't prepared. And at number 6, we have the legendary Moltres. This is a fire and flying type with genuinely incredible stats at 125 special, 100 attack, and 90s in every other stat. Moltres, as mentioned, is one of the legendary birds, and unfortunately the worst of the bunch, due to being slower than the best NU Pokemon, Charizard. The differences may boil down to the fact that Moltres only has Fire Spin, Agility, and Fire Blast, while Charizard's move pool is incredibly diverse, with moves like Earthquake and Swords Dance. Moltres also struggles immensely against any bulky water type such as Tentacruel or Vaporeon, as unless you already did a large chunk of damage to them prior to Moltres being on the field, it's practically helpless. One of the few benefits to using Moltres is, of course, its unmatched special stat, as its Fire Blast is the single strongest attack in the entire NU tier. Moltres also has access to the incredible Fire Spin, which, if you remember the Tentacruel segment, is incredibly similar to the move Wrap with its own unique benefits. Fire Spin is a base 15 fire move which traps your opponent for 2 to 5 turns. However, thanks to Fire Spin being, well, fire type, it allows Moltres to gain the stab boost on the move, gaining an extra 1.5 times boost to its damage, along with Moltres having agility to boost its speed to ensure nothing can outspeed it and get out the Fire Spin damage. However, this is all great until you realize Charizard also gets Fire Spin and is natively faster with the better boosting move Swords Dance, so Moltres is still outclassed. Moltres even has its own unique counters in the fossil Pokemon Omastar, which leaves it useless a large amount of the time, as even though Omastar doesn't enjoy risking getting burned by Fire Blasts, it still takes little to no damage from any attack of Moltres' move pool. Moltres generally thrives on teams built to chip down your opponent, paralyze the faster threats, and dealing enough damage that Moltres can switch in and click Fire Blast 6 times to finish the rest, with Fire Spin to help in case something too strong manages to get on the field. Unfortunately, Moltres is pretty much unusable on a playthrough due to immediate obtained in Victory Road, the final area in the game, and by then you should have a flying type to fast travel. Moltres is an incredibly strong Pokemon, however it's just outclassed by Charizard in essentially every other way. And at number 5, we have our second legendary bird, Articuno. This is a flying and ice type with a great stat spread of 85 attack and speed, 90 HP, and a great 100 defense, and a similar to Moltres 125 special stat. Articuno is one of the 3 legendary birds and is an incredibly strong wall breaker despite its lackluster typing. Ice and flying are possibly the worst types in the game due to their just awful defensive profiles, as they're weak to rock, fire, and electric. Articuno also somewhat struggles with the fact that it effectively only has a single attack to utilize in the powerful Blizzard. Articuno's coverage is so poor it often relies on the incredibly unreliable Mimic to try and copy a usable move from its opponent. This may sound fine against the in-game AI, as you can see the moveset to choose a move to copy, but for whatever reason, when you battle another human, it's entirely random what move you get. So the best chance for Articuno to perform competitively is to roll a dice and hope you get a usable move. All of this may lead to Articuno seeming bad. However, Articuno's Blizzard is one of the strongest attacks in the game, which led to it being far too strong for any tier below OU, as almost nothing could survive more than one Blizzard. Articuno ended up being banned from underuse due to how incredible it was at spamming Blizzards. And even though it never found a solid place in the OU tier, it still has the accomplishment of being banned from every tier below it. Articuno has had a smaller niche in the OU tier in the past, as its incredibly high special stat means it can take down nearly anything with a Blizzard boosted by the same type attack boost. And during the late game, if you can get an agility to raise its speed, Articuno may be a genuine monster ripping through entire weakened teams. Articuno does have a devastating weakness to special walls, such as the previously mentioned Omastar and the fellow ice-type Cloyster, as its Blizzard effectively does no damage to them. And it's then left hoping to Arceus that Mimic stole a good move previously in the match. Articuno is effectively unobtainable in a normal playthrough until you get to the 7th gym on Cinnabar Island. But at that point in the game, you could have obtained ice types like Cloyster, or the final legendary bird who we'll get to later. Articuno is a fine Pokemon, and is even a very strong choice versus the final Elite Four member Lance. But beyond that, it's just too unreliable, leaving it to be a risky Pokemon to use in Gen 1 competitive. And at number 4, we have the final of the legendary trio, Zapdos. Zapdos is an electric and flying type with the same special and HP as before, but with the highest speed so far at 100. And while its defense is the lowest at 85, its attack is perfectly fine at a solid 90. Zapdos is a monster in all regards. Not only is its typing the best of the 3, as electric is incredibly good at stopping the overflow of incredible water types, it also has the first real moveset of the trio. Zapdos has access to Thunderbolt as its main stab, but for once can actually utilize its flying typing thanks to the move Drill Peck, to stop any grass or fighting types that might get in its way. Zapdos also has the incredible Thunder Wave to dish out paralysis throughout the game, and it even has the niche Light Screen to double its defense against special moves as long as Zapdos remains on the field. Zapdos is undoubtedly the strongest electric type in the entire overused tier, and even the best electric type for a playthrough, as you can obtain one as soon as you get the Surf HM at Fuchsia City. Meaning from the 4th gym, you can utilize this absolute powerhouse. Zapdos is threatened by Rhydon and Golem similar to Moltres, and unfortunately Zapdos is even weaker to the duo thanks to their full immunity to the electric type. So playing around those two are absolutely vital to the success of Zapdos. However, beyond that, it's fairly difficult to check Zapdos successfully, as most Pokemon don't like getting paralyzed, or risking a critical hit from Drill Peck thanks to Zapdos' high speed stat. Zapdos is a genuine all-star and overused, along with being phenomenal in playthroughs thanks to how easily obtained it is. And at number 3, we have Exeggutor. This is a grass and psychic type with the same special stats as the bird at a powerful 125, along with 95 HP in attack and a decent 85 defense, but with a really awful 55 speed. Exeggutor was known as one of the strongest Pokemon in all of Generation 1 overuse, as it got an excellent typing and a move pool which puts nearly every other grass and psychic type to shame. Exeggutor's incredible move pool contains obvious moves like Psychic, Mega Drain, and Hyper Beam, and the incredible Explosion to clean up any Pokemon you need to kill in one attack, along with Sleep Powder, which has a 75% chance of putting the target to sleep, basically guaranteeing that you get a KO. Exeggutor's typing is one of the best in the game, as it resists 6 different types and is immune to the Ghost type, along with allowing it to hit the common rock and water types for an insane amount of damage with a stab of Mega Drain. Exeggutor does take a massive hit to viability in playthroughs as it's restricted to the Safari Zone, which means it's basically unusable unless you get incredibly lucky, or you're equally stubborn. Exeggutor has fallen off in the OU tier slightly in recent times due to the rise of Pokemon like Jinx, Alakazam, and even Zapdos, as besides Explosion, Exeggutor really can't harm these Pokemon at all. Despite this, Exeggutor is still an incredible wall, and a sleeping machine who can switch in on so many incredibly powerful Pokemon such as the previously mentioned Rhydon, and threaten them out instantly due to its unique typing and wonderful move pool. And at number 2, we have Gengar. This is a poison and ghost type with a miserable 60 HP in defense and a pitiful 65 attack. However, that's where the bad stats end, as Gengar has an incredible 110 speed and an astronomical 130 special stat. Gengar is the only fully evolved ghost type in Generation 1, and Gengar has an incredible move pool from Psychic and Thunderbolt to the consistent damage of Seismic Toss and the incredible Explosion. Gengar can deal massive amounts of damage throughout a game, along with its true calling of Hypnosis. Gengar is the fastest Pokemon with access to a sleep-inducing move in the game, and it makes a name for itself as an incredible lead who is able to threaten out nearly anything for free. Gengar does struggle from its typing, as Poison and Ghost are rather terrible types due to giving Gengar weakness to Ground and Psychic. However, the Ghost type can be useful as it gives Gengar an immunity to the incredibly common Normal type. Gengar struggles immensely due to its poison typing, as quite literally every single psychic type in the overused, underused, and never used tiers can 2-hit KO it with a stab psychic. Gengar also really struggles from its weakness to ground, as Pokemon such as Snorlax, Golem, and Rhydon all threaten it with Earthquake, while Gengar can do little but nothing in return besides hope to put them to sleep before it dies in one hit. Gengar is decent in playthroughs, as you can obtain one immediately after the 3rd gym in the Pokemon Tower if you trade your easily obtained Haunter. However, its typing is rather awful for multiple gyms, along with being a decent choice versus the Elite Four, as long as you teach it Thunderbolt to handle most of Laurel, Lance, and Blue's teams. Gengar is an excellent Pokemon who's only really hurt by its awful typing, unlike our number 1 slot. And to finish us off at number 1, we have Alakazam. This is a pure Psychic type with mostly terrible stats from its astonishing bad defense at 45, its just plain awful 50 attack and 55 HP. And you'd wonder where all of its stat points went until you look down and see its insane 120 speed and 135 special. Alakazam is the textbook definition of a glass cannon, and it takes the incredible speed to become one of the strongest Pokemon in the entire game, both competitively and casually. In the context of a playthrough, Alakazam is incredible as you can obtain an Abra right before the 2nd gym. And while it technically has no moves besides Teleport, if you can get the Abra to level up to 16, you immediately get to Kadabra, who is an incredible Psychic type which learns Confusion immediately on level up. And if you have a friend or own a 2nd Game Boy and another Pokemon game, you can trade the Kadabra to yourself and back to get the incredible Alakazam after a single gym battle. Alakazam has a surprisingly shallow move pool which usually holds back powerful Pokemon, but when your special stat is this high, it really doesn't matter that you can only attack with psychic moves. Alakazam has access to Thunder Wave to spread paralysis, recover 50% of its HP, and Seismic Toss to hit consistent damage against special walls like Exeggutor. Alakazam does struggle a lot versus other psychic types, especially the slower ones such as the aforementioned Exeggutor and Slowbro, who don't care if they eat a paralysis and can set up an Alakazam's face, along with Chansey, who has incredible bulk to take basically every single attack in Alakazam's arsenal and paralyze it. This leads to the other problem with Alakazam, and that's the fact that if Alakazam is paralyzed, it's effectively useless, as nearly every physical attack in the game can kill it in one hit. It's always risky whenever you send out an Alakazam, as if your opponent expects it, you can be in an awful position instantly. This doesn't make Alakazam useless, as it's still a powerful lead in the overused tier, due to checking common Pokemon such as Gengar and Lapras, due to taking little damage from their Thunderbolts, and outspeeding Gengar to KO it before it can spread its sleep. Alakazam is a wonderful Pokemon with a great typing and excellent stats who demolishes entire teams as long as 1 to 2 Pokemon have been hit by status moves previously in the game. Now, we must mention the fact that technically this list is missing 3 Pokemon in Haunter, Kadabra, and Mewtwo. We decided to keep things interesting and we'd only include 1 Pokemon per evolution line, as talking about Kadabra and Haunter on the same list as Gengar and Alakazam just isn't very interesting. We also left Mewtwo off the list due to the fact that Mewtwo is going to be on a huge number of our top 10 lists, so we wanted to give the spotlight to Pokemon who are actually accessible during a playthrough and in the normal tiers of competitive play.